If you've been suffering from recurrent calcium phosphate kidney stones, it's possible that an autoimmune disease called Sjogren syndrome may be playing a role in your stone formation. But what is Sjogren syndrome and how does it impact stone formation? If you'd like answers to these questions and more, stick around for this video. Hi, I'm Joey Weichman and welcome to Stone Relief. Autoimmune diseases impact roughly 4% of the world population, and these conditions can be debilitating, and doctors don't really know why they're causing or why they're forming. To add insult to this injury, some of these disorders can also lead to kidney stones. In particular, Sjogren syndrome promotes calcium phosphate stone formation through its disruption to the kidney's ability to balance acidity in the blood. This imbalance of acidity cascades into a whole host of other problems relating to kidney stones. So before we dig into how Sjogren's contributes to your calcium phosphate stones, let's lay a foundation with a little background on the condition itself. Sjogren syndrome, as I had mentioned previously, is an autoimmune disease. And if you're not familiar with what this is, autoimmune disorders are really particularly nasty. They're actually when the body attacks itself. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but doctors don't really know why this is occurring. However, it is our body attacking other parts of our body. In particular, with Sjogren syndrome, this is attacking the glands that are responsible for creating mucus and moisture throughout the body. So some of the symptoms that you would commonly see along the lines with this would be like dry or itchy eyes, dry mouth. Also comes along with fatigue, and it also connects with joint pain as well because there's a lot of connective type of tissues that are impacted by this syndrome. Now, there are two types as well. Primary means that there is no rheumatic type of disorder that's going to be linked to it, which will make more sense in a second. And then there's also secondary, which is tied to a rheumatic type of disorder. And when I say rheumatic, I mean things such as like rheumatoid arthritis. These are dealing with inflammation and things occurring within the joints, which is also tied to the autoimmune aspect of this condition. Lupus as well, dealing with connective tissues and also the skin. And then there's also scleroderma as well. You'll see rashes and patchy aspects of this. But again, all these things here are autoimmune in nature, and they're attacking certain parts of your body. Now, again, as I had mentioned, the root cause of this is really unknown. However, I've got a hypothesis, and it all deals with diet and a lot of the things that we're eating inappropriately, not necessarily just with kidney stone sufferers. We're going to dig into that in this next chapter here, but as a baseline, I say it's related to diet because it's controllable and can be cured by diet as well. Now, mainstream medicine, mainstream media are not going to mention any of this at all. It is not in their literature. It is not in the conversation that you'd have if you have an autoimmune disorder. It's not anywhere around there whatsoever. Now, I know this because there's a massive community, and it's growing out there, of people who have been on either an animal-based diet, which is predominantly animal-based foods, and maybe a little bit of seasonal and regionally appropriate fruit. And then there's also the carnivore community, which is just meat and water. And individuals in those communities, these conditions and also Sjogren's itself, there are numerous instances of where people have completely cured themselves of these conditions, or at least put them in a better position to be able to manage some of the symptoms that they might be feeling. And then over the course of time, the goal would be to eliminate it entirely. But that's for another topic in another conversation. So today, let's switch gears to the next chapter. We're going to talk about Sjogren's impact on actual kidney stone formation.
Just a reminder, this information is available in written form on our website. Find the link below in the description.
Okay, so I alluded to a whole cascade of negative impact that Sjogren's, this autoimmune disorder, can have for people who are suffering from kidney stones. And let's dive into that a little bit further. So on the surface, about 14 to 20% of people who have Sjogren's are forming kidney stones. And this makes sense as a whole. Like when you take a look at it as a global prevalence of kidney stones, right around 20% of the population forms this kidney stone type. So it makes sense that around that same number suffering from this condition are also going to be suffering from this, kidney stone affliction. But what specifically is going on that is leading to these calcium phosphate stones from forming? Because that is the stone type that is directly linked to Sjogren's. Now, first thing, and probably the most important aspect of this, is the alkaline urine that Sjogren syndrome tends to generate. Now, when I say alkaline, I'm talking about a urine pH that is greater than 7.5, and this can vary by a few points in the decimal range, but in general, anything over that 7 range, 7.5 to give it a little bit more buffer, is going to be considered alkaline urine. So, the way that this syndrome, this disorder, impacts urine alkalinity is relatively complicated, so I'm going to do my best to kind of walk you through the different steps of what's happening. So, on a whole, when you have Sjogren syndrome, you are also having some impact that is occurring to your kidney. And in particular, Sjogren's forces something called tubular interstitial nephritis. That's also abbreviated as TIN. Now, this tubular interstitial nephritis, or TIN, then leads to distal tubular renal acidosis, also abbreviated by DRTA. Still hang on with me here. Now, this distal tubular renal acidosis is then leading to an increase in the acid load that our body has to deal with. And this increased acid load then drives our blood's pH down, which then inversely increases the alkalinity, or the pH, of our urine. So, through this complicated mechanism, this is how we are arriving at urine, pH is being increased to an alkaline level if someone has Sjogren syndrome. And if you've been following me for any point in time, you know that alkaline urine is a problem. Really, truly, anything outside of neutral urine is going to be problematic, because when you have an alkaline urine environment, calcium, which is prevalent all throughout our body and in our urine, favors bonding with phosphate ions, which are found in our body throughout everything, and they form calcium phosphate stones. So this is initially problematic. Now, additionally, Sjogren syndrome can cause low urinary citrate, and citrate performs like a protective role when it comes to calcium stones, because citrate will bind with free calcium, meaning calcium that's not bound to something else in the body, and take away its ability to be able to bind with things like oxalate, or in this case, phosphate ions in your kidney. So this is a problem. Now, what happens actually to cause low urinary citrate? So we're going to go back to a couple common threads here as well. You're going to see distal tubular renal acidosis pop up quite a bit. So when you have distal tubular renal acidosis, again, this acid load is going to be increasing. And when you have an increased acid load, not only does blood pH drop and urine pH increase to alkaline, you also have a disruption to the way that your body handles citrate, because when you have distal tubular renal acidosis, the body is going to be triggered to reabsorb this citrate to buffer out that acidity that is being caused by Sjogren syndrome. So this is kind of this vicious cycle that presents itself. And then lastly, Sjogren's can also lead to an increase in urinary calcium. Now, I also want to put a little caveat to all this. Most doctors and people in the medical community think that an increase in level of calcium in your urine is a risk factor for kidney stones. And you're right. If you're eating the standard American diet or a vegan or a vegetarian diet, yeah, more calcium in your urine is going to be a problem, because there's more building blocks, if you will, to be able to build those kidney stones or for things to crystallize. However, if you're not, as you should be, if you're a kidney stone former, you shouldn't be eating vegetation, shouldn't be eating ultra-processed foods, you should just be eating meat and maybe some fruit. That's it. When you subtract all those things out, this is really high urinary calcium levels are a non-issue, but for most of the general population, including the kidney stone forming population, this can be potentially problematic. But there's with those caveats. Now, how does Sjogren's actually increase urinary calcium? Well, again, back to distal renal tubular acidosis, increases that acid load as per the regular ones, or the previous ones that we talked about. However, this increased acid load also strips away calcium from your bones. So calcium is going to be stripped away from your bones. It's going to enter your system. It's going to be processed by your body like, hey, what are we doing with this excess? And it's going to get shuffled into your kidney, which then has the ability to bind with phosphate ions. And thus, these are the mechanisms by which Sjogren syndrome potentially impacts kidney stone risk. If you're looking to say a big F you to your kidney stones, join our free community at kidneystones.com.